This video is brought to you by the lovely guys over at RoboToys. For all your Hasbro, Takara, third-party and knockoff desires, RoboToys has you covered. For 10% off, use the code DrLock 10% off at the checkout. Now on to today's diagnosis.
Read the disclaimer! On the other one, you bastard!
Greetings Cybertronians, I'm DrLockdown and welcome to the final installment of Seacons Week. Throughout this marathon, we've had our ups and downs with certain figures, and yes, some of the downs have been quite disheartening, but now it's time for the main event. One thing I've noticed throughout reviewing these fellas is that the designers have prioritized one specific mode so that the combined mode can be as good as it can be. For example, Kraken makes an utterly horrible leg. Well, he's kind of a bad toy anyway, but that's beside the point. So does that work in favor of the combined mode? Well, I don't want to prolong this any longer, so let's finish this. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of the review, I think it's appropriate to look at all of these in the context of the whole team. Not everyone is going to want to keep these as the big king man himself, so jumping right in might be rushing things. This may be partly because they're all retooled from the same line, so the line work may have similarities, but even then the retooling work matches up very closely. That said, Gulf and Tentakill seem a little too out of place. If each member were slightly different in terms of colours, it might have worked a bit better, but since there are heavy similarities between certain members, I can't help but feel they end up as oddballs. Still, they're following a source material, so what is there to really say? If the original was flawed in that regard, then most people won't give a shit if they recreate such a thing. Fortunately, this doesn't seem to be an issue in their robot modes. There's enough of a through line between each member, so the eye isn't thrown too far off. It's also helped by the occasional splotches of yellow, even if not all members have them. It's also commendable that each has a different feel to it, which isn't always the case when you consider how Combiner Wars and Power of the Primes turned out. Massive kudos. But enough of that, it's time for the main event. This might be difficult with my current setup because the song that I usually use for transformation sequences kinda caps out at 3 minutes. And it's gonna take a while to transform this guy. Vaughn!
Yep.
Boot up that PS4 and play Tokyo Daylight from Persona 5.
I'm not f***ing Syrian though.
Just do it.
Is this just an excuse to play more Persona music on your channel?
Yes.
Well, who am I to complain?
So for the combination mode, half the bots will be in robot mode, half the bots will be in beast mode, just because that's the easiest way. You want to keep Turtler, Overbite, and Tentakill in their beast modes, and Lob, Claw, Gulf, and Kraken in their robot modes. Pretty simple, right? Makes it much easier in the long run. We'll start off with Tentakill, just because he's a little bit easier. Bring these bits down and out of the way. Open off this whole section here. You've got 2 pegs there and 2 slots there, and they use the double hinge to lock into place. You bring this up temporarily just so you have enough clearance, and then that'll allow you to get this little peg out of here. And then you've got 2 grooves there that will slot into these 2 things here. And usually you'd think that is pretty loose, but once you push that down and then lock it back into place, it is rock solid, at least more solid than Moonracer. If you haven't already, bring these 2 down, bring the feet down all the way, rotate the arms on the ball joints. Then you got 2 pegs here and 2 slots there, and they just store on the leg like so. And if you've got guns, they store on the back here. Now for the foot assembly, you take one of the hands and one of the feet, and they peg together to form what is supposed to be a platform. Make sure the thumb is around the correct way so that it's facing outwards for that extra bit of stability. And don't forget to bring up the combiner peg, I forgot to do that. Then you got a peg and a slot, and they just go together like so. One leg done. Gulf works better transforming from robot mode because then it allows us to access the legs a bit easier. Undo the legs so that you can get access to the hinges. Rotate 180 degrees, then bring this whole section up and out of the way. We're going to have to reorient anyway, so we might as well just get it out of the way. Open up and do the whole Combiner Wars collapsey leggy thingy as you do, and collapse them and lock them into place. If there's one thing I will say, is that they picked a good leg, because these beast legs make the whole thing really solid. If you haven't already, remove the guns, because they're not going to work. And whilst you're at it, bring in the tail and peg it into place, just so that you can fix that up. Now, the hinges have to be done very specifically. The pink hinge needs to go back into the torso, but this hinge needs to remain down. It remains up in the robot mode, so it's out of the way, but for the leg mode, it needs to remain down. Otherwise, you're not going to have any clearance at all. You then bring the fists into place, and then you've got a slot there and a peg there, and these all peg together, making this rock solid. And then for weapon storage, you combine the guns for the Target Master mode, and peg them onto the side, just like so. The head unfortunately needs to be facing forward, just so that it's got enough clearance to actually rotate around fully. And then, as a certain Bloosh man would say, second verse same as the first, with the foot. And that pegs on like so. Bada bing, bada boom. Turtle is a little simpler. You get the chest into its robot mode configuration, except you don't go all the way. You're not going to want to move it all the way around. Instead, you just want to leave it here for now because it'll be able to peg into something later. Whilst you're around here, bring the guns into robot mode configuration as well, and extend them, like so. Bring this down, open up these panels here, but don't move anything around, just bring the entire robot head out and rotate it over the top, and the robot head will lock into the robot's chest, like so. Then you can close up the panels again, get in there. Then the robot chest uses a double hinge to now go on top of those panels and peg into place, and then up come the gorgeous chrome parts. Lovely. Robot arms down and click into place, and then you open up these claws and open up those hands, and they just fold around the side there, like so. Very, very simple. And then that's just gonna peg right into there. Ah, Kraken, my old enemy. You want to open up this section and open up that, and then this whole section folds in, closes up, folds back up, but oh, instead you actually want to get that around here, and that down there. That is incredibly messy, but it'll make sense later. Fold up the fists, bend the arms 90 degrees, you got 2 slots there, and 2 slots on the inside, and they just peg in just like they did on Swoop and Cutthroat. Click the wings back into perpendicular position, then you've got a peg there and a slot there, and that'll peg together. Then the arms come together and the whole thing rotates around, ready to go. You just bring out the combiner, peg like so. Get out there, you bastard. You get a hand plugged in there. Ooh, that one's tight. And then that slots onto the side like so. Much like Golf, you want to reorient the back section. It was folded up like that. Instead, you just bring that into its beast mode configuration and bring that like that. But also make sure to fold the mouth down, and then you've got some space to actually bring the combiner peg out. 2 pegs on the side here, and then these rotate around and peg into them like so. Well, not really pegs, just loosely slot. It's not the best. But only take the front one around like so, and I'll show you why later, because we've got some weapon storage to deal with. Peg the legs together, rotate around, bring in the combiner hand, almost good to go. And in it goes. This one's a bit more difficult because it keeps getting stuck on the chrome parts. But that should be there. And also, whilst I'm here, make sure the head parts are flipped out like that. And whilst I'm at it, you basically just take these and combine them like that. And the reason I only got you to transform one of the hands is because that hand will now allow you to store the gun, like so, and it just kind of slots in there. Nice and easy. And on the topic of weapon storage, I forgot all about Krakens. You basically just take his guns and combine them with this weapon holder over here like so, and then the whole thing just pegs into the side of the arm like so. Very, very easy. We got all of this shit to deal with. Start off with the sword. The top part will be done first, just because the bottom handle has a tendency to come undone. You take the 2 knives and they clip on the side of the sword like that, and then you take these 2 sections over here and they peg in the side, and then you get that done, and we have ourselves a nice trident, or a fork, or whatever you want to call it. And last but not least, Overbite, who transforms into a Target Master. Basically just fold that up into its robot mode configuration. Bring the beast feet into robot mode configuration as well at the front over here. Bring these into combined mode configuration, or I guess, yeah, it is combined mode, it's not just the leg mode. Jesus Christ, these panels are very tight. Bring this section down like so. It just kind of sits at the bottom there. Rotate the combiner peg up for later plugging in. And last but not least, plug this bad boy in however you like. I guess that would work a bit better. And that's the gun mode. And we're done. Let's take a look at King Poseidon. Right off the bat, there's a certain presence to King Poseidon that you don't often get with other Transformers. Granted, this presence is shared across most combiners, but there's an elegance to the design that I haven't really seen in a while, at least since Unite Warriors Computron. If you're a die-hard fan of King Poseidon or Piranacon, then you'd probably nut on completion of the first combination, but everyone else, well, he's nearly there. There's definitely a lot to love here. For starters, thanks to the designers prioritizing a specific individual mode for each limb, everything works together seamlessly this way. It also helps that the colors are laid out very well, with pink and dark blue on the bottom, and turquoise and aqua on the top. Mad props for Lobclaw and even Kraken for both pulling off such well-realized shoulder designs. It's incredibly clean, even with the weapon storage on both sides. And can I gush about the hands again? I know I already did back on Tuesday, but for sake, these are a godsend. The hand and foot guns present in Combiner Wars were, quite frankly, awful. And even after they made dedicated hand and foot pieces, they still felt both comically oversized and woefully underarticulated. This is the first time that an appendage like this has actually looked natural. No longer do I feel like they're bringing the entire piece down. For once, they've actually surpassed the perfect effect upgrades. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said about the feet. They're a smidge undersized, but visually they get the job done. However, they don't really support the weight that well. There's one teeny tiny problem preventing these from being perfect. The problem is they use the hands to keep it from toppling over, but due to both the fingers not locking in and the joints that hold the 5mm pegs not being quite strong enough, he topples over pretty easily. I guess it's slightly better than the HFGs, but for a combiner that's at least a third heavier than normal, it's pretty disappointing. That being said, it's basically par for the course for any combiners 2015 and onwards. There's always something you have to fix somewhere, maybe with the exception of Battle Trap, but he's only 2 members so I don't really think he counts. I'm sure someone will make a piece that plugs in and makes this much more sturdy, or maybe Perfect Effect will come back and make some better feet. Whatever the case, there's no way this will be left like this for long. Does it make it excusable? No, but it is par for the course. Other par for the course issues include the thighs. Once again, much like Silverbolt and Hunger before it, they are far too thin. Again, there's a potential fix for it, but so far it only exists for Silverbolt. Considering Hunger is not in fact a retool of Silverbolt and more of a spiritual successor, the shapeways parts are unfortunately not compatible. So it looks like in the future I'll have to commission someone to fix that. Still, as far as official Combiner Wars style combiners go, this is definitely in the higher end that Hashtag has put out, and easily one of the best bestial ones. Does he outclass Superion, which is what I consider to be the best of the bunch? Sadly no, as there's genius in the simplicity of that design, but it is still really bloody good. In terms of accessories, we have a gun made out of Overbite, and this brings us to one of the more controversial elements of this set, even more so than the existence of Tentakill as a retool of Moonracer. There's no current way to have the fist hold the gun properly. Is this a shame? Kinda. It instead connects using the Prime Master port, which much like the awful Power of the Prime's hand editions has a cover that needs to be removed. You can store the panel on the back as well, if you'd like. Plugged in, it actually does look quite nice. The design isn't the cleanest, but it's pretty cool overall. Unfortunately, the second part of the controversy rears its ugly head. The elbows simply aren't sturdy enough to hold it up. To many, this is an absolute clear-cut deal-breaker, but to me, it's just a sad fact of the combiner system. Yeah, it's disappointing, but honestly, what were they supposed to do? But anyway, beyond that, you finally get a look at the combined Trident. This thing is amazing and easily sets the standard for all combining weapons going forward, in all ways but one. The paint really brings it together, and you can even fan mode it into a spear. There's just one unfortunate caveat. The handle is way too short. Honestly, it looks more like an oversized fork than a giant trident.
Oh my god, I love fettuccine!
If you have Siege Soundwave, and I'm hoping you don't because it's pretty boring, you can use his extendo pole to make it a little bit better, but I'm still hoping someone makes a better upgrade kit later down the line. Still, as I said, it is painted quite well, so I'm sure it'll turn into a masterful blade eventually. But that's the downfall of every Hashtag combiner. It'll be eventually good after a lot of hard work. In its current state, it is still heavily flawed. It looks utterly beautiful, especially with the amazing head sculpt, but structurally it's the same old same old. Articulation is pretty stock standard combiner-wise. The head is on a swivel and the shoulders use combiner pegs to get ratcheted universal joints. The biceps swivel thanks to the waists on each individual member, and the ball joints act as double jointed elbows. Doesn't really work that well though. Thanks to the 5mm connection port, the wrists swivel and each finger has its own special hinge. The thumb also hinges but has a nasty habit of coming undone. It's the one criticism I have for these new hand designs, otherwise they're bloody brilliant. Sadly, you have to contend with these awful ratchets that Turtler has, but at least they hold a pose properly. The outward ratchets work fine though, and below that he has 2 separate thigh swivels, one using Turtler's bicep and one using the combiner peg. Following that, the knees get a solid 90 degrees, and the feet rotate due to their 5mm connections. Finally, they're on faux ratcheted ankle tilts. Posability is pretty stock standard, but so is the issue of the weight. It's naturally very hard to pose a combiner, especially one using the Combiner Wars system. If you've ever owned a combiner using this system, the combine mode is pretty much what you'd expect. Size-wise, despite his feet, he doesn't quite get ahead over those who use the Perfect Effect add-ons. That said, he definitely has a presence out of all the combiners that use this specific system so far. As a general display piece, he's bound to stand out. But I can't help but feel he won't become a truly brilliant combiner until later down the road. If you're expecting this design to be the greatest combiner ever released, then you are definitely going to be disappointed. For me, I started out like that, but after receiving each figure and seeing how they combined one by one, my sort of expectations were tempered a little bit. But if you're buying this on the aftermarket, it's definitely something you need to keep in mind, since most people are going to be buying it as a whole set. And receiving it all in one go, it may disappoint if you get your expectations just a little too high. Another thing to keep in mind is that I don't know what the scalping situations with this guy are going to be like. People could be charging well over 1,000 for him just because he's rare, even though he's technically not rare, he just had a small pre-order window. But don't overpay for him. He's absolutely lovely, but he's not $1,000 lovely. Still, I can't deny that in terms of engineering, paint and sculpt work, he is absolutely gorgeous. If you're a massive fan of the character, you really can't go wrong with this purchase at all. And although once combined it may seem a little bit expensive for what you're getting, each individual piece well and truly makes up for that price. Except Kraken, but we've already gone over that. The combined mode may seal the deal in the very end, but do be expected to do the usual and upgrade him later down the line. Ah well, at the very least is still better than the TFC version, that much is true. Do we really need another update for this guy? Does he really disappoint that much? Nah, not really. Another decade and then maybe they can take another crack at him. So in the meantime, spend your money at today's sponsor, Robotoys. Robotoys specializes in Hasbro, Takara, like this figure here, third-party and knockoffs. Don't forget to use the code DrLock 10% off at the checkout for a single-use 10% off. Discount on any purchase. And yes, they don't currently have King Poseidon in stock at the moment, but Takara may reissue this later down the line, and if the comics are anything to go by, we may be getting a God Neptune as well. But I don't know, I'm no seer, I'm just seeing some evidence from the comics and it may or may not happen. But until then, this project has certainly been a big one. I'm gonna take a bit of a rest now. It's been a long week, and I most definitely need some time off.